Hey, welcome to the Kingdom Calibrate podcast, where we have honest conversations about theology, worship, leadership, and practices for Christ followers. So be sure to follow us wherever you access your podcast content. We drop new episodes every single Tuesday early in the morning. So if you get up at 6:30 a.m., we'll probably have something out by then for your morning jog for those of you that are masochistic and like that kind of thing. Hey, today we're talking about the importance of a first impression. All right, when someone walks into your church, it really doesn't take them long to decide if it's a friendly place, if it's a safe place. And to talk a little bit more about that, I've invited a very special guest. This is Heather Rogers. So Heather, welcome. You serve as the resident expert of first impressions at Be Hope Church.
Actual title, yeah.
Actual title.
Yeah.
And I know we met how long ago was it? It was a couple weeks ago, or maybe like a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
I have no sense of time at this point in my life. But it's a role that I had taken over the church I'm currently at. Okay. And I figured I would go to you because you have a giant team of people that you lead forward, and you do this at a really high level. So as a resident expert, I just wanted to bring you on, just have conversations about the importance of a first impression.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about guest experience stuff, so works out great for me.
Awesome. Well, listen, we've worked together a little bit in the past, but tell me a little bit about what you do now, how long you've been at the church, what led you to where you are.
Sure. I am the director of guest experience at Be Hope Church, and oh my soul, I've been there 20 years. But guest experience really hasn't been a thing for more than 5 or 6 years, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. Also, 20 years is like 40 years, and ministry years, it's like dog years.
Oh, great. So. Fantastic. I'm halfway through. Okay. I think that it was probably about 6 years ago, our first-time guest numbers started climbing, and someone in leadership must have said, hey, we should pay attention to this. This matters, and we want to make sure people have a great first impression, a great first visit to Be Hope Church. So I'm just so glad they asked me to figure it out and put all those pieces in place. When I started, when they first came up with that idea, there were about 60 people on a couple different teams with no real focus or organization, and people showing up, maybe someone scheduling and holding doors, but there really wasn't any unity.
Sure.
No one knew why it mattered, and so that's where I came in.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about it, so I started asking questions. What works? What doesn't work? What do we want it to feel like when guests walk in our doors? Which is always a great place to start.
Yeah, I think you told me, based on our last conversation, how long does it take somebody to come up with an impression of your church when they get onto your campus?
Yeah, 5 seconds. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a great book called Blink, and he talks all about that, those first impressions, like the lizard brain and the limbic system, all those things that go into making those decisions that you don't even know is going on in your head. But wow. 5 seconds for someone to decide if they're going to stay, if they're going to come back, if this is a place they want to be.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
Right.
Especially when you have volunteer teams and you can't be everywhere at once, right?
Yeah.
So how do you manage all those teams? Give me the scope of the teams that you kind of oversee.
Sure. So we went from 60 to 225 people.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. So fun. I definitely don't do it alone. I have an amazing team of leaders who help me manage all those teams. And they can be the people on the ground in the spaces doing all the things, so that I don't have to be 20 places at once, which is awesome. We've got a parking lot team, waving and greeting people as they drive in, running around with umbrellas when it's raining, which is so helpful, pulling wagons and helping harried parents get all their kids into the building. We've got greeters at the doors, obviously welcoming and holding doors open. Ushers with flashlights, helping people find seats. Safety team, making sure everybody feels safe and there to grab a Band-Aid, if the need arises. Coffee bar, you can't have church without coffee. I think it's in the Bible.
Right. It is. Also in our household.
Yeah, coffee bar. We've got a team geared specifically for first-time guests, and they meet them in a space that's a little bit quieter where they can ask questions. And there's probably a team or two I forgot, but all of those go into creating a feeling of safety and welcome, helping people find belonging and just connection. Oh yeah, first time guest follow-up team. I did forget one.
Oh yeah, and that one's important too. Right?
Exactly. Like connection is such a big part of the experience, right? You don't want to walk away from a room full of people feeling lonely. I don't want anyone to walk away from church feeling lonely. And so that's where our first time guest follow-up team comes in. They help make those initial connections.
Yeah. And I think it's especially important, I know the context to Be Hope, I was there for a while and obviously you're still there and the church is continuing to grow. And it's really hard for people, especially as churches get larger, to really feel like they do have a sense of connection. So I think going back to, the follow-up team, but also all those first impressions teams, right?
They make a big church feel smaller.
Yeah.
Like if someone sees you, and you feel known in that moment in a room full of people, like immediately the space feels smaller. Like, oh, eye contact. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because like you find your community and like you find your group, right? I always say like you're looking for your tribe when it comes to going into a church. And it's like, who are the people I connect with? Who are those first people that kind of gave me the scope of the land of what's going on here?
Right.
And it's like you kind of create little small pockets of small groups, right? And there's power to that, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think you can also feel lonely in really small churches, right?
Sure.
That's the misnomer is like the bigger a church gets, the harder it is to connect.
Right.
But it's the same reality that even in tiny church, if you don't find a place to connect and there's not people there that are friendly, you're going to have the exact same problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going off script here. I know I had all these beautiful questions that we had lined up and I told you we were going to do this, but it's more fun to do it this way. Right. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced running a team, both of that size and scope, and also just the ministry in and of itself?
Challenges I've faced. Nobody likes change, right? Unless you work at a laundromat. Pun joke.
Fun. As a dad joke. I like that.
Oh no. Crossed into dad joke territory. That's great. Nobody likes change. And I find that in leading a team, if there's a large amount of resistance from my team leaders, from team members, then I haven't done my job well in sharing the vision for that change. Simon Sinek wrote a great book, Start With Why, and he's right. Like if I don't start with the purpose for the change, the reasons, what the outcome will be, no one can buy in to what we're doing. So I've come to realize in the very short span of 5 or 6 years that I need to start with vision, like paint a picture for where we're headed. I had a great example of this as something recent. The youth pastors I work with at Be Hope came to me and said they wanted to start like a guest experience team specifically for youth nights. Okay. So midweek service for high school and middle school.
Great idea.
Had nothing really in place over the past couple of years. And so I sent a message out to my Hope team, my team of volunteers. And I said, imagine what it was like for you in high school. Like what kind of insecurities were you carrying? What kind of anxieties did you have walking into a brand new space full of your peers? What would it look like for church to be so welcoming and loving that as soon as you walked in, a high school student, middle school student, as soon as you walked in, you felt valued and known, and all of those insecurities melted because it felt like a safe place. Well, why don't you help me create that on Wednesday nights?
Oh, yeah.
And how much more powerful is that than, hey, would you come do this?
Yeah.
Like I think most people are like, hey, I want to do this. Why don't you come do that?
Yeah. Well, you have something beautiful there, which is that. So the power of vision, right? The power of setting not just a mission, but like setting a culture.
Sure.
Right. I love that kind of language because, in a culture, it's like you're creating what you want the feel to be like. You're creating, we were the kind of people that we want to be. Yeah. When we come in and serve at this place. And like, that's the why behind serving.
Sure.
Right. Because any of us that work in churches or have worked in churches, you're always trying to figure out, question number one, which is how do I get volunteers, whatever we want to call them? How do I get people that can help me move that mission forward?
Right.
But often I think we get those people in and we don't do a super good job setting up the the mission and the vision of the why.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, hey, I need somebody to come and serve coffee. Why? Well, because we need coffee and the expectations that we have coffee. It's like, yes, but like there's a deeper question there, right? What is the purpose of even serving somebody a cup of coffee? Right. So like, how would you answer that question? Like, what's your why behind everything that you do? And I think you hit on it already, but
behind everything?
Yeah, like behind that entire guest experiences piece. Like, what's the feel you're trying to create? What's that mission that you're trying to pull people into?
So the goal of guest experience for my team, but I think in general, it applies. The goal of guest experience is to remove every barrier that would prevent someone from fully engaging in a worship service.
Well, that's good. Talk more about that.
Yeah, the way we do that is we anticipate needs, we practice perspective taking, and we extend empathy. I have amazing team leaders I mentioned, but my greeter team leader, Lisa, she has this, it's probably years of experience, but she can hone in on someone's discomfort. Like she knows the body signs to look for, like those signals that someone is brand new or they're uncomfortable or they're looking for something. And she just knows. And immediately she meets them where they are, alleviates their discomfort and walks them where they need to go. And it's so cool to watch. It's not, an innate thing. It's something she's practiced, something she's learned. And now she trains her team to do that too. And I love that. Perspective taking, like I can't walk into a space and think everyone coming in is just like me. They've got the same baggage. They've got the same needs. That's not the case. The mission of our church is to be someone's first church. And that means they have very different needs than me. I've been in church a long time, and maybe they have heard rumors of how terrible Christians are, and who hasn't. Maybe they've been hurt by a church person in their past. Maybe they went to church as a kid and people were mean to them. I don't know what they're walking in with, but I have to practice taking someone else's perspective so that I can anticipate those needs and meet them where they are. Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. That's a lot for me to think about right now. So one of the reasons I want to talk to you about this is, I recently stepped into this role of also overseeing, not to the level that you do. I kind of oversee worship, but also I've kind of taken on this first impressions guest experience team.
A big step.
I know it really is. It really is. And it's so funny because I remember the last time I had visited a church before that. And most of us that work in the church world, we don't visit churches very often because we don't have a chance to, right? A lot of times we're serving with our people, we're leading our people.
Yeah.
But I don't know, when's the last time you went into a church where it was like, oh my gosh, this feels so awkward and uncomfortable. And I actually I've worked in the church for 20 plus years, and I have an active, what I'd say is maybe a phobia of visiting other churches sometimes because I'm thinking through the same questions. Sure. And this from an internal perspective, I've been around the church forever. I'm like, okay, where am I going to drop my kids off? Is there going to be clear signage? Do I know which door to go in?
Sure.
Had visited a really large church a while back and literally couldn't find the front entrance. There were 5 of them. And I'm like, I don't know which one's the front. So we parked in one spot. No. We walked into what we thought was the main entrance. No, that was the kids' wing. It's shoot.
No. Who is this? I'm going to call them.
Yeah, I can't say. I can't
support bad churches. No, this is not okay.
Yeah, and the service was amazing. Everything was great about church. But literally, that was my first impression is I have no idea where the front door is. And there is no sign that says which door I'm supposed to park in. Yeah. It was pouring down rain. So at this point, we're soaked. We got the 2 kids with us.
Yeah.
Have no idea where I'm actually supposed to take kids, or I found it, but I don't think that's the way I was supposed to get there. And just the importance of, thinking through the perspective as a visitor in a church is a really hard exercise to do when you've been somewhere for a long time. So have you had a chance to visit churches recently and maybe had a similar experience?
Not recently. It's been a few months, but I visited a really small church in Michigan, and immediately similar to your experience, there are 2 entrances. Immediately I thought, okay, which door do I use? The door I ended up using was the door I was supposed to use, but it walks right into the back of the worship center, the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is odd.
Oh, that's intimidating.
Also, what if church had been in service?
Right.
How awkward. Walk in the middle. Okay. That's disruptive. And there's no one greeting, very, very small church.
Sure.
And kind of, old fashioned setup. They're working on it. They've got some new leadership and, they're trying to get there. It'll take some time, but I just thought, okay, I would do this differently. I would get rid of the cobwebs. I would add some clear signage, put someone at the door to like open the door and greet people. So it's clear this is the friendly spot I want to walk into.
Yeah.
Things like that. So
yeah, that's really good. I think to myself, like, if you can create a friendly house, right? If you're practicing the gift of hospitality, and I'm not super gifted in that, my wife is, I'm just not, but I follow her lead.
Good place to start.
Yeah, like, how do you want somebody to feel when they walk in your house?
Exactly.
Right? You want it to feel warm and inviting and welcoming, and you don't want them to have to think about, okay, like nobody walks into a house thinking like, is this the front door?
No,
or at least those
thinking,
kind of people are not my friends.
If I need a bathroom.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like, is there a place I can put my kids? Where's the kitchen? I need to know where the food is. I need to know where the coffee is.
Is there a dog?
Yeah. So I think people assume that like you have to be, a super large, mega sized church to be able to have teams in place like this. But like, I'm just assuming that it's still the case, but you run mostly on volunteers, right?
Yes.
And you do that by setting that vision and that culture.
Yep. And finding the right people for the right places.
Yeah.
Which can take some time. I've tried shoehorning people into spots that were not in their gifting and did not work out well. And you just have to be a little patient and take some time and spend an inordinate amount of time with people, like having coffee conversations, find out what they're passionate about. And then, hey, I think you'd be great at this, and have those conversations.
Yeah. And that's really good leadership, right? Because I find that most people don't, even if they have a gifting or a passion, they don't necessarily know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the huge roles of successful leaders is to be able to pinpoint those gifts in other people and say, hey, I've got something for you that I think matches with what I see in you. And it might not be something they see in themselves.
Sure. Yeah. And actually, that's my favorite part of my job, is meeting with people and helping them figure those things out for themselves. A lot of times, you're right, they have no idea that that's a gifting they have. And as a mentor, leaders are pretty much mentors. I have the privilege of spending time with people and helping them discover those things for themselves. It's so exciting for me.
Yeah. And, there might even be an assumption there. Like, I think I'll add one word to what you said.
Sure.
Good leaders should be mentors, right?
Yeah.
And I think we were just having a conversation before we started about, what's it look like to lead from an authoritative way. And like when you're working in ministry, and especially in ministries like this, right? Like talk a little bit about what it is for you as a leader. Like talk a little bit more about the mentor process. What is that the part that geeks you out in the morning? Is like gets you out of bed a little bit, because you're not just giving people orders, right? You're bringing people on. Back to that first conversation, you're pulling them into culture and vision, and you're giving them a mission to send them forward on.
Yeah. I mean, I joke in the office like that I'll drop the hammer. I'm barking out orders to my coworkers, but it's not the case. It's not real life. The thing I love, even being an introvert and preferring to spend my time alone, the thing I love the most about my job is those one-on-one conversations with people and helping them discover those things. Figuring out, their gifts and how they can join in the work that's happening already at the church, or start something new. And sometimes it leads them somewhere else. Sometimes outside of the church, different church. Sometimes they're starting a business or a nonprofit. Sometimes it's away from my ministry totally. And that's kind of the danger, but also the awesome thing when you're leading with open hands and mentoring people. It's what's best for them, not what's best for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good perspective. And that's really hard as a leader. Think like not what's selfishly going to serve my ministry. As
much as I want to keep everyone to myself, it's not the best for them.
Yeah. And when you send, sometimes you do have to send great people and you say like, hey, this is maybe not as good of a fit. And I can see that for you. Once again, going back to like part of being a leader is helping to walk alongside people, even help them make hard choices, even if it's not benefiting ourselves. Right.
Absolutely.
And that's probably the more painful piece of ministry in general is we lead people away from ourselves, but a necessary part. But I love that mentoring and leadership are kind of one and the same. And I think the best leaders are ones that are always looking to pour into people. And with volunteers, like talk about that a little bit. You've got, pretty much nothing but volunteers, and you've got this giant team.
Yeah.
Like, how have you kept people on board?
Kept people. Well, like I don't force them to stay, but I find that if I communicate to everybody what they're bringing that nobody else does, the role they're playing, the part they play serves a bigger purpose and the value they add just by bringing themselves, their unique gifts to this, it goes a long way. I write a lot of thank you notes. I take every opportunity to connect what they do in their serving role to the bigger mission. Sure, you are a greeter, you might open doors, but here's how you're helping people find belonging and find the hope of Jesus, just by opening a door. I have a lot of coffee dates, a lot of lunches, like anything I can do to communicate the value that they bring. I take every opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's huge. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. And, keeping people on board, I think a lot of it just has to do with how do we appreciate people?
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as people feel like, they're just filling in a spot and they're being used, right?
Sure.
Then people don't tend to stick around very long. But I love that. Like, I love leaders who will spend more time out in a coffee shop meeting with their team. And I think that's what effective leadership looks like, especially now. I think we're kind of past the days where an effective, ministry leader or pastor kind of spends all their time in their office all week long, right?
Sure.
Because we just need to be out with our people, living life.
Yeah. Everybody's got things to do, but if you focus completely on your task list and neglect the people who are actually getting the real work done, then it's not going to happen and it's going to fall apart.